The pickaxe strikes limestone. Dust explodes into Turkish sun. September 1994. Klaus Schmidt kneels in dirt at Göbekli Tepe, brushing away thousands of years. His fingers trace carved lines. A fox emerges, teeth bared, frozen in stone. Schmidt's hand trembles. This carving is impossibly old. More stones emerge. Massive T-shaped pillars, 10 tons each, standing in perfect circles. On every surface, animals prowl, lions, scorpions, snakes. The craftsmanship is breathtaking. Ancient. Schmidt checks his notes 3 times. Carbon dating, 9,600 BCE, 11,000 years old, older than the pyramids by 6,000 years, older than writing, pottery, the wheel, older than agriculture itself. His mind races. Humans were supposed to be simple hunter-gatherers then, small bands, crude tools, following herds. They weren't supposed to create monuments. They weren't supposed to have the organization, the surplus food, the knowledge to build anything permanent. Yet here it stands, deliberately buried, preserved for eternity, or hidden. Ground-penetrating radar shows at least 20 more circles beneath the soil, each one larger, each carved with impossible precision. A question burns. If hunter-gatherers didn't build civilization, who built this? And if they could build this 11,000 years ago, what else did they build that we haven't found? The sun sets over the Mesopotamian plain. The stone animals watch him in fading light, silent, knowing, keeping their secrets for another 11,000 years. But Schmidt knows one thing. Everything we've been taught about the dawn of civilization is wrong. The numbers don't make sense. Klaus Schmidt stands before skeptical archaeologists explaining the problem. Each pillar weighs 10 to 20 tons. The quarry sits a quarter mile away. Moving one pillar requires 500 people pulling in coordinated effort. 500. But that's just moving it. Carving the limestone, shaping the T-form, creating detailed reliefs, that requires master craftsmen, thousands of hours per pillar. Göbekli Tepe has more than 200 pillars. Population estimates for 9,600 BCE suggest bands of 30 to 50 people maximum. Nomadic hunters, moving with seasons. Building just one circle would require gathering multiple bands, feeding them for months, coordinating labor, all while hunting to survive. One archaeologist asks, maybe it wasn't built at once. Schmidt nods. 1,500 years of construction. But here's what keeps me awake. He shows a map. Red dots scatter like stars. Göbekli Tepe is not alone. Karahan Tepe, 30 miles away. Similar pillars, similar age. Harbetsuvan Tepesi, Sefer Tepe, Hamzan Tepe, a dozen sites within 50 miles, all featuring T-shaped pillars, all impossibly old. Each site needed hundreds of workers. Together, they suggest what archaeologists swore was impossible. Complex society before agriculture. But the real shock, stone tools recovered from the site. Thousands of obsidian blades, sharp enough to carve limestone. The nearest obsidian source, 150 miles away. Someone was running long-distance trade networks 11,000 years ago. Someone was organizing labor on a scale that wouldn't be seen again for 3,000 years. And we don't know who they were. Dawn breaks, 11,600 years ago. A man wakes in a stone shelter. His band numbers 43 people. They know every plant, every animal trail. Survival is their occupation. Yet 3 months a year they come here to build. His hands are calloused from flint knapping, not farming. He's never planted a seed, but he knows stone like surgeons know flesh. Today they raise a pillar. Multiple bands gather. 5 groups, over 200 people. They bring gifts. Obsidian, shells from 300 miles away, red ochre. Shamans paint their bodies. Drummers pound. The smell of roasted gazelle fills the air. Songs pass knowledge. Stories encode star movements, properties of stone. The pillar lies horizontal, carved with a leaping fox. Rope wraps it. 200 people grip the ropes. A shaman raises his arms. The drums explode into rhythm. They pull. The stone groans, refuses. Someone screams. The rope is slipping. Hands bleed. They pull harder. The pillar shifts, inches, feet, sliding toward the hole. A man loses his footing, goes down hard. Others drag him clear. No stopping now. The stone has momentum. Wooden levers jam underneath. 20 men push while 100 pull. The pillar rises. Slowly, then faster. Someone's lever cracks. He jumps back as it explodes into splinters. The pillar tilts past the balance point. For a moment it seems to hang in mid-air. Then gravity takes over. It slams vertical with a ground-shaking thud. The crowd roars. Not triumph, reverence. Another sentinel for the gods. Another ancestor standing watch. He catches his breath, blood on his palms, muscles screaming. 9 pillars now. Perfect symmetry. Sacred geometry older than the concept of geometry itself. This is not a home. No one lives here. But this place is more important than any home. This is where earth touches sky, where the living speak to the dead, where chaos becomes order. In 3 moons they disperse. Back to following herds. The pillars stand alone, waiting for next year's gathering, waiting to grow taller. Modern archaeologists attempt to recreate the process. It goes badly. 2014, southern Turkey. An experimental team assembles replica stone tools to carve a limestone block. Master stonemasons, engineers, 50 volunteers. Hour 1. Painfully slow. Flint tools work but dull quickly. 60 blades gone the first day. Day 3. The carving is crude, nowhere near the original's precision. One archaeologist notes, either they had more time or they knew something we don't. Day 7. They abandon carving and focus on moving. The replica weighs 8 tons, smaller than most originals. First attempt, 2 sprained ankles, 1 crushed finger. The pillar moves 12 feet. The project is shelved. Klaus Schmidt examines the quarry. The builders used natural fissures, widening cracks with wooden wedges soaked in water. As wood expanded, rock split along predictable lines. Clever, but it doesn't explain the precision. Pillar 18 features a carved belt with fox fur pouch and a 3-dimensional human hand. Millimeter precise. Tool marks show consistent angle and pressure. Trained specialists, not casual laborers. Someone was teaching this craft. Someone had apprentices. Someone passed down knowledge over generations. But here's the real mystery. The oldest pillars are the most sophisticated. Layer 3, from 9,600 BCE, contains the largest pillars and most elaborate carvings. Layer 2, built 500 years later, shows simpler construction. By abandonment around 8,200 BCE, the pillars are smaller, carvings cruder. The site doesn't evolve toward complexity, it devolves from it, which means the builders brought this knowledge with them. They already knew it when they arrived. Schmidt examines pillar D43, the vulture stone. Dense iconography, scorpion, vulture, headless man, circle suggesting the sun. Beneath it, symbols predating cuneiform by 6,000 years. 2017, University of Edinburgh. Martin Sweatman publishes controversial analysis. The carvings represent constellations, a star map. The configuration matches the sky in 10,950 BCE, over 1,000 years before Göbekli Tepe was built. If true, astronomical knowledge, long-term record-keeping, obsession with marking cosmic events. Whoever built these monuments was encoding information, recording something important enough to carve in stone for eternity. The question shifts. What did they know? And why does it feel like we're seeing the end of their story, not the beginning? Anthropologist Robin Dunbar proposed a number, 150. That's the maximum stable social group size for humans. Beyond 150, societies need formal hierarchy, written rules, enforcement. Göbekli Tepe required at least 500 workers simultaneously. 500 people working together without agriculture, without cities, without kings. The math doesn't work, unless something else was binding them. Jens Nortroff, current director, walks among pillars at sunrise. He points to evidence that took decades to recognize. The entire site is engineered acoustic space. The circles form natural amphitheaters. Sound resonates between columns. Drumming in the center produces standing waves, vibrations that synchronize heartbeats. Modern tests reveal chanting at specific frequencies creates mild trance states. This wasn't just a temple, it was neurological technology. Archaeologists map late Paleolithic sites across the Fertile Crescent. Small camps, temporary shelters. Each houses a single band, 30 to 50 people, except during certain times. Winter camps show multi-band gatherings. Animal bones reveal feasting on massive scale. 60 gazelles killed in single hunts, butchered communally. Wild wheat ground into flour. Evidence of fermented beverages, perhaps the world's first beer, brewed for ritual consumption. These gatherings weren't just construction projects. They were the social glue of dispersed populations. Modern parallel, the Inuit traditionally lived in small mobile bands, but once a year, dozens of bands converged for the gathering. They traded, arranged marriages, settled disputes, held ceremonies, then dispersed. The gathering was more important than daily survival. It was identity itself. Göbekli Tepe served the same function. The site contains no domestic waste, no hearths, no houses, no burials. People didn't live here. They came to build and worship, then left. But feeding 500 people for 3 months requires killing 2,000 to 3,000 gazelles. That level of hunting would deplete populations, yet animal bones show no decline over 1,500 years. The solution? Wild einkorn wheat grows abundantly within 5 miles. Genetic analysis traces modern wheat's domestication to this exact region, beginning around 9,500 BCE, the same time Göbekli Tepe was being built. Here's the revolutionary hypothesis. The monuments came first. Agriculture came second. People gathered for rituals. The gatherings required surplus food, so they intensified wild wheat harvesting. Built storage, started selecting the best seeds. Over generations, they domesticated the plant, not to become farmers, but to feed their religious gatherings. The monuments didn't follow civilization. The monuments created civilization. Schmidt wrote in 2006, "First came the temple, then the city. Now evidence supports him." Humans didn't settle down because agriculture was easier. We settled down because we built things too sacred to leave behind. Why animals? Why these specific animals? Every pillar crawls with carved life. Foxes, scorpions, vultures, snakes, wild boar, lions, but never domesticated animals, nothing submissive. Every creature is fierce, dangerous, or liminal, existing between worlds. The vulture appears most frequently. 47 carvings, many clutching human heads or hovering over headless bodies. This is not decorative. This is doctrine. Çatalhöyük, 500 miles west, settled around 7,500 BCE. Wall paintings show vultures attacking headless humans. Human remains show excarnation, bodies left exposed for vultures to clean before burial. Sky burial, still practiced in Tibet today. The builders saw vultures as soul carriers, birds taking the dead from earth to sky, flesh to spirit. At Göbekli Tepe, vultures aren't threats. They're transformation. The fox appears almost as often. 62 carvings, usually leaping, always alert. In Mesopotamian mythology, foxes are tricksters, boundary crossers, creatures of dawn and dusk, shamanic animals. The scorpion, 11 carvings. Deadly, but also medicine. Scorpion venom in controlled doses produces altered consciousness. Archaeological evidence shows scorpions were caught, dried, possibly consumed ritually. The snake, 34 carvings. Immortal through skin shedding, symbol of renewal, life, death, rebirth in one creature. Every animal represents transformation, movement between states, crossing boundaries. Julia Gresky, anthropologist, published findings in 2017. She examined human skull fragments from Göbekli Tepe. 3 showed deep carved grooves, deliberate modifications after death. The skulls had been displayed, ancestor veneration, the dead maintained presence among the living. At Göbekli Tepe, the monuments themselves might represent ancestors. The T-shaped pillars aren't abstract. Look closely, they suggest human forms. The T represents shoulders and head. Some have carved arms, hands, belts with pouches, giant stone ancestors standing in councils, watching the living gather between them. The circles become ancestors' councils. The living enter the space between dead generations, literally surrounded by their wisdom. The animals carved on ancestors' bodies represent powers they possessed: fox cunning, vulture transformation, snake renewal. This isn't primitive religion. This is sophisticated theology, encoded in stone. But the most shocking discovery came in 2021. Excavators uncovered enclosure H, deeper than previous layers. The pillars are enormous, over 20 feet tall, and the carvings tell a story. One pillar shows a procession, human figures moving toward a central scene. Above them, geometric patterns, could be stars, could be symbols. The sequence suggests narrative, a journey. The world's first story, told before writing existed to record it, and buried deliberately. Every circle was eventually filled with rubble, not collapsed, deliberately buried, preserved. The builders spent generations raising these monuments, then carefully entombed them. Why? Göbekli Tepe is not unique, that's the terrifying part. West Java, Indonesia, workers clearing landstrike stone. They expect colonial ruins. Instead, ground-penetrating radar reveals 5 layers of construction stacked through millennia. The deepest layer, 25,000 years old. Picture it, the last glacial maximum, ice sheets 2 miles thick, crushing Europe. Woolly mammoths roaming frozen tundra. Humans huddled in caves, right? Wrong. Someone in tropical Indonesia was organizing hundreds of workers to move megaliths and build monuments. Jump to Malta, Mediterranean Sea. An old farmer plowing his field hits limestone. Not natural, carved. He keeps digging. Temples emerge. 50-ton blocks fitted without mortar, arranged in patterns matching celestial movements. Carbon dating comes back, 3,600 BCE, 5 centuries older than the pyramids. The farmer asks the obvious question: how? Archaeologists have no good answer. The builders had no wheel, no metal tools, no domesticated animals to haul loads, just human hands and obsession. Now Brittany, France. A tourist hiking coastal trails stumbles onto something impossible: 3,000 standing stones marching in perfect rows across 4 kilometers. Not scattered, not random, deliberately placed with geometric precision, erected 4,500 BCE. By people we call Neolithic, New Stone Age. Primitive, right? Yet they created alignments modern surveyors struggle to replicate. Easter Island, Pacific Ocean. Everyone knows the Moai statues. But here's what's shocking. They were carved just 800 years ago by people with stone tools, limited wood, and a population under 10,000. They moved 900 statues, some weighing 80 tons, across volcanic terrain without wheels, without draft animals. Modern engineers declared it impossible. Then Polynesian descendants demonstrated the technique, walking the statues upright with ropes and coordination. The legends were engineering manuals all along. The pattern becomes clear. These sites share knowledge. Göbekli Tepe aligns to the summer solstice. So does Malta. Karnak aligns to winter solstice. So does Stonehenge. Sites separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years, all tracking identical celestial movements with identical precision. Then there's the measurement. The megalithic yard, 2.72 feet. It appears in Britain, Malta, Brittany, Armenia. Hundreds of sites using the exact same unit maintained across millennia. Without writing, without centralized authority, without anything resembling civilization. Information networks spanned continents, standards maintained across time scales that make modern nations look like fireflies. These weren't accidents, this was connection. Something tied them together, something bigger than survival, something worth preserving in stone that would outlast empires. And we're only beginning to understand what it was. Graham Hancock stands at Sacsayhuaman, Peru, running his hand over stonework that shouldn't exist. Massive andesite blocks, some weighing over 100 tons, fitted with joints so tight a knife blade can't slip between them. Spanish conquistadors in 1533 asked the Inca who built these walls. The Inca replied, "We don't know. They were here when our ancestors arrived." But Göbekli Tepe broke that circular logic. Here was undeniable proof. Complex architecture existed before agriculture, before cities, before everything we thought was required. The Antikythera mechanism sat in museums for decades before anyone realized what it was. A mechanical computer from 100 BCE, predicting astronomical positions decades in advance. Dozens of bronze gears in a device that shouldn't have been possible for another 1,500 years. We only understood it because we found it. How much else was built, used, and lost? Roman concrete outperforms modern formulas. Damascus steel's manufacturing process is still debated. Greek fire's composition remains unknown. Each represents knowledge that existed, then vanished. Technology doesn't progress linearly. It oscillates. Knowledge accumulates, civilizations rise, catastrophes strike, knowledge scatters. Survivors start over, unaware they're rebuilding what ancestors already achieved. At Göbekli Tepe, construction quality declines over time. The oldest structures show masterful stonework. Later additions are cruder. By 8000 BCE, the site is abandoned. The knowledge walked away, but there's evidence it dispersed. 2018, researchers discover dozens of later Neolithic sites containing single T-pillars reused as building stones. Like refugees carrying pieces of their homeland, later populations took fragments of Göbekli Tepe's tradition with them. Easter Island's moai were carved as Polynesian society collapsed from deforestation. They kept building even as their civilization crumbled. The statues grew larger as if trying to invoke ancestral power to save them. It didn't work. By 1722, Easter Island was in ruins. The moai stood as tombstones, yet the people remembered. They told stories of chiefs who commanded statues to walk. Modern experiments proved the moai could be walked upright using ropes. The legends encoded real engineering knowledge, preserved orally for centuries. How much more knowledge is preserved in myth? Flood myths are universal. Every ancient culture has one. Mesopotamian, Hebrew, Greek, Hindu, Chinese, Aztec, all describe catastrophic flooding that wiped out earlier civilizations. 12,800 years ago, the Younger Dryas period began suddenly, then ended 11,600 years ago. Ice sheets melted rapidly, sea levels rose over 400 feet. Coastal settlements would have drowned, any civilization on ancient shorelines would have been obliterated, their monuments submerged, their knowledge scattered. We've explored less than 5% of the ocean floor. Who knows what lies beneath? 8,200 BCE, Göbekli Tepe falls silent. The last gathering disperses. Nobody returns. The circles are filled with rubble, buried, preserved, abandoned. What happened? Core samples from Lake Van reveal the answer: sudden climate shift. The 8.2 kilo-year event, rapid cooling lasting 2 centuries. Rainfall patterns shifted overnight. Wild wheat yields crashed by half. Gazelle migrations changed completely. The abundant resources evaporated. Picture the final gathering. Fewer bands arrive than last year. The feasting is smaller. They killed only 30 gazelles instead of 60. The wheat stores are low. Elders argue, should they return next year? Can they afford to? The answer becomes obvious: no. Survival trumps spirituality when your children are starving. Göbekli Tepe wasn't abandoned by choice. It was abandoned by necessity. Climate killed it. This pattern repeats across time. Stonehenge, built over 1,500 years, then abandoned when the climate shifted. Malta's temples, used for 1,000 years, then silent when drought struck. Easter Island's moai production ceased as deforestation turned paradise into wasteland. The Maya built pyramids for 1,000 years. Then cities were abandoned mid-construction, tools left in place, meals half-eaten, populations crashed by millions. The survivors scattered into jungle, forgetting the cities their grandparents built. The Indus Valley civilization, sophisticated cities with running water and standardized measures, vanished so completely we still can't read their writing. We don't know their kings' names. We don't know what they called themselves. We know nothing except they existed, then didn't. But here's what skeletal evidence reveals. The Neolithic transition was trauma, not progress. Early farmers were shorter, sicker, shorter-lived than their hunter-gatherer ancestors. Tooth decay exploded from grain consumption. Infectious diseases thrived in permanent settlements where waste accumulated. Malnutrition became epidemic as diets narrowed. Why choose this? They didn't choose. Climate forced them. Population pressure forced them. Resource depletion forced them. Farming wasn't liberation. It was last resort survival when the old ways failed. And it killed the monument-building tradition dead. Permanent settlements meant stored surplus. That surplus attracted raiders. Violence exploded. Early agricultural sites show mass graves, fortifications, traumatic skull injuries everywhere. Peaceful, seasonal gatherings at sacred sites were replaced by constant warfare over land, water, stored grain. Power became localized and hereditary. Chiefdoms emerged, then kingdoms, then empires built on slavery and conquest. The communal effort that once raised monuments was redirected toward building palaces for elites, temples for priests, walls against enemies. Stonehenge shows this transition in stone. Early phase, communal, anyone could enter. Later, massive sarsen stones limiting access. Only elites reached the center. The monument became exclusive, a display of power. By 1600 BCE, burials ceased. The site was forgotten within generations. Local legend attributed it to giants. Humans forgot they'd built it themselves just 1,500 years earlier. This is how knowledge dies. Not in fire and catastrophe, but in quiet abandonment. Each generation passes down fewer details. The builders become legends. The legends become myths. The myths become forgotten. Within 3 generations, expertise becomes mystery. Within 10, mystery becomes myth. Within 30, myth becomes silence. And we stand among their stones asking, who could have built this? The answer stares back. People exactly like us. People who faced climate catastrophe, resource collapse, the choice between preserving sacred knowledge and keeping children alive through winter. They chose their children. The monuments remained, silent witnesses to what was lost. 2023, Göbekli Tepe. Tourists walk among pillars buried for 11,000 years. They take selfies with stone foxes carved by hands that turned to dust before the pyramids existed. They check phones, complain about heat. Nobody thinks about those hands. Nobody considers the organization, the knowledge, the stubbornness to move 10-ton blocks with rope and will. We assume we're smarter, more advanced, the pinnacle. After all, we have computers, satellites, internet. Göbekli Tepe is the answer to what ancient hunter-gatherers had. They had this. Modern crews struggle to recreate ancient techniques. We can't explain Roman concrete lasting 2,000 years while ours crumbles in 50. We can't move Baalbek stones without cranes. We declare our ancestors' achievements impossible, then build museums housing evidence they happened anyway. The irony is suffocating. We've gained knowledge and lost even more. We know how cells divide, but not how Egyptians cut diorite with copper tools. We understand quantum mechanics, but can't agree on how Stonehenge was built. Progress isn't linear, it's cyclical. Knowledge accumulates, civilizations rise, catastrophes strike, knowledge scatters. Göbekli Tepe stood active for 1,500 years, longer than the Roman Empire, longer than the United States has existed. Generations built, worshipped, believing their monuments would last forever. They did. But the builders didn't. Their language is lost, their songs silent. Here's the uncomfortable question. How much of our knowledge survives if civilization collapses tomorrow? Digital storage degrades. Hard drives fail. The cloud requires constant electricity. If the power grid fails, how long until our knowledge becomes inaccessible? 1 generation? 2? The ancient builders chose stone because it endures. They carved their most important information into the hardest substance they knew and buried it for protection. They were right to be paranoid. Their civilization ended, but their monuments survived to tell us, we were here, we were capable, remember us. Klaus Schmidt died in 2014, never seeing Göbekli Tepe fully excavated. Ground-penetrating radar shows at least 16 more circles beneath the soil, each potentially rewriting history. We've barely scratched the surface. Literally. How many more lie buried? How many megalithic sites are dismissed as natural formations? How much evidence do we walk past because we're not looking? The megaliths teach us humility. They prove humans have always been human, creative, ambitious, capable of achieving the impossible. They also teach us impermanence. Every civilization believes it will last forever. Every generation thinks it's the pinnacle. The stones say otherwise. We were mighty, we built wonders, we knew secrets, and we became dust. In September 1994, Klaus Schmidt brushed away 11,000 years of forgetting. He uncovered proof that history is deeper, stranger than we imagined. The pillars stand, silent, waiting for us to ask the right questions. Who built the megaliths older than civilization? We did. Humans did. The real question isn't who built them. It's what else did we forget?